Hello everyone, today I'm going to be showing off my 5-color Elemental Tribal EDH deck, and as well as just kind of do a deck tech for it, and tell you why I run the cards. So I use Horde of Notions as the main commander. He is a 5-color Vigilance, Trample, Haste, 5/5 that says pay 5 mana, you may play target elemental card from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. This happens at instant speed, so you can play creatures using that ability on other people's turns. Going into the land, I run 2 of each basic. I use Full Arts just for no reason other than I like them. Now into non-basics. Flamekin Village enters tapped unless you reveal an elemental from your hand. Taps for a red, and then you can pay a red, tap it, give a creature haste on the turn. It's kind of a good combat trick. It's basically just another untapped mountain, is the way I look at it. And giving creatures haste on a tribal land really isn't that bad of an ability. I think it's fine enough to run. Again, this is a budget deck. This isn't like a high competitive. This is more of like a janky build of, it's elemental tribal. So continuing on, I run each man land, Lumbering Falls, Raging Ravine, Hissing Quagmire, Stirring Wildwood, Lava Claw Reaches, Celestial Colonnade, Wandering Fumarole, Creeping Tar Pit, Shambling Vent, Needle Spires, and then that is it for manlands. The reason I run them all is because they turn into elementals, and it's just kind of a neat gimmick I thought of. Going in, I run all of the tri-lands, Jungle Shrine, Arcane Sanctum, Savage Lands, Mystic Monastery, Crumbling Necropolis, Nomad Outpost, Seaside Citadel, and I'm also in the process of trying to get all of the other tri-lands from Ikoria. So far, I only have Zagoth Triumph and Katria Triumph. I just haven't gotten any yet. So lands that tap for everything. Command Tower, a kind of beaten up City at Brass. Exotic Orchard, because most likely, if you're running a deck that's more than 2 colors, like any 2-color plus deck, run Exotic Orchard in it. Most likely one of your opponents in Commander is playing it, and at best it's most likely just a dual land that comes on untapped. Ancient Ziggurat, because it's primarily creatures. Primal Beyond is a weird elemental land. As it comes into play, you may reveal an elemental card just like with Flamekin Village. If you don't, it enters tapped. Pay, you get a mana of a random you get a mana of a generic color or colorless, or you can get it for an elemental spell or ability. Path of Ancestry, because my commander is an elemental. And I put this also as the 5 colors. Although it does tap for colorless, you can also pay 5 to filter 5 in any combination. So I think it's just a good filter land if need be. Now going into creatures and spells in no really particular order, aside from the top 2, Golos, Tireless Pilgrim. He enters, get a land tapped, and then pay 7 mana, get some good stuff. Him and Morphon the Boundless, he is a 7 mana 6/6. He's going to be an elemental in this case. He's going to make elementals cost less, and he's going to be a tribal lord. I run these 2 in the deck as pretty much alternate commanders for Horde, just to kind of spice things up. Morphon does the same thing. He just kind of makes everything cost cheap as well as a big buff. So if I want to play Battle Cruiser today, I can play with Morphon. Or if I'm just feeling like playing big free spells, I play Golos. It's kind of as a how I'm feeling basis. Alright, now going into the main meat of the deck. Villainous Wealth, Sultai X. Target opponent exiles the top card of their deck, and you can play all non-lands. I get a lot of mana in this deck. I run 38 lands because, elementals typically have a high CMC. So I can usually just dump a ton of mana into this and then rip off an opponent's deck for like X is 8 or so, I'd say on average. Descendants Path. Beginning your upkeep. Reveal an element, basically reveal the top card of your deck. If it's an elemental, play it for free if you have an elemental on the field. The reason I run this too is because I run on the the manlands. So before this triggers, I can animate an elemental using my land, and then hopefully I can get a trigger off this if I'm in a sticky situation. Rishkar's Expertise. I have a lot of elementals in this deck with a lot of big CMCs and a big power. Like looking at my commander himself, he's a 5/5. So, So typically using it just on him, paying 6 mana to draw 5, and then play something for 5 or less for free. Pretty good. Chandra, Awakened Inferno. So the reason I actually added her in the deck originally is because her -3 is a tribal nuke that just deals 3 to everything I don't control, because I run very few elementals in this deck. It's mostly elementals, but maybe 1 or 2 aren't. But usually I see her minus being used as just an uncounterable, really uninterruptible kill spell. And, you know, just embleming is some good burn damage too. Ewit, a non-elemental. I run Ewit. It's a good staple in green decks, primarily just because, hey, you get some back from the grave, you call it a day. Nyx Bloom Ancient, he's a big chunky guy that triples all your mana from even your non-land permanents too. So if you have like Soul Ring, it's now tapping for 6. This guy's really good for Villainous Wealth. Or really any big X spell. I think I have a few in the deck. But typically this is a high CMC deck, so he does help out a lot. Torrent Elemental, 5 mana, 3/5 flying. When he attacks, tap all creatures the defending player controls. So your basically boys are unblockable because your opponent can't block. And then I've never used his bottom ability, but you can play him from exile if need be. Again, I've never used it. It's mainly just so he makes all your boys unable to be blocked by tapping down your opponent's field. Smoke Braider, probably one of the best elementals, I think. It is a 2 mana 1/1 that says tap it, get 2 mana in any color combination to play elemental spells and abilities. So it's pretty ideal, especially when you're running a 5-color deck and you have a dork that taps for 2 color in any combination to play your deck. You know, it doesn't hit your non-elemental spells, but getting down my commander turn 3, a 5/5 Vigilance Trample Haste is always an excellent time. Brighthearth Banneret, I think of cutting this guy every time I make any edit. He's a 1 mana 1/1, 2 mana 1/1 that says your elementals are going to cost 1 less. And then I've never used his reinforce ability, but it's just kind of there. So the elementals in this deck have like a high cost, but I feel like since I ramp pretty hard anyways, I don't really need a cost reducer, especially when it's taking an entire deck slot when I could have like another bomb card. He's like always on my list to be cut. Shriek Maw, it's basically just a kill spell, and then sometimes it's a 3/2. That's just kind of there. Yeah, I usually just evoke it out, destroy a non-black creature, non-artifact creature. And if you play mono black, which I have with this deck, he does nothing. So don't play mono black when you're playing this, when you use this guy. Wilderness Wreck, mainly just a little meme for my commander. I go to my end step, I untap all my lands, and then on someone else's turn, I can cheat in an elemental using Court of Notion's abilities. Plus, it's always good to leave up threats and having all your mana untapped anyway, so you can start doing other things. Like if I need to make my land a creature and block if someone nukes, or if I just want to get some basic value, something comes in tapped, I'll just untap it anyways. Rhythm of the Wild gives all my boys haste and can't be countered, and sometimes, but very rarely, do I just put a 1/1 counter on it. This deck's pretty battle cruiser, so I do like to beat down pretty hard. Kodama's Reach. Kodama's Reach and Cultivate are used in pretty much all of my green decks. Just because it is 3 mana, get 2 lands, 1 to the field, 1 to your hand, so it's really good for mana fixing. And when you're playing a 5-color deck, you kind of need it. Thran Dynamo, just a kind of a big rock. Again, like most of my spells have a high CMC, so getting that extra 3 mana kind of helps out a lot. Sunbird's Invocation, again, since I'm playing a lot of high mana spells, when I cast a spell, look at the top X cards of the deck, where X is the mana cost, and then just play one of those essentially for free because of how high costed the deck is on average. There's usually, I'll say the average CMC for this deck is about 5. So you're most likely going to look at the top 5 and then play something 5 or less for free. It's basically a little Rishkar's expertise every time without the card draw. And then it is on the bottom of the deck. Conjurer's Closet. I have like a decent amount of blink in this deck because a lot of elementals do have enter the battlefield triggers. Using a non-elemental as an example, like Golos, you know, when he enters, you get a land. And then we can look at Shriek Maw when he enters, destroy a non-black creature. And then there's also Ewit and the other cards of that nature. So having an extra ETB trigger on the end step is always fine. In worst case scenario, you just use it to untap something if you need a blocker later on. Warstorm Surge. Elementals have a high power because usually they have a high mana cost. So it's just good for removal. It's good for like excess damage, especially when you have a lot of blink shenanigans going on. And especially when you can usually, a lot of elementals have Evoke that you can just kind of cheat them out. You deal the damage, you do their big effect, and then that's it. It basically just makes the deck a little bit faster, in my opinion, although it costs 6. That's like the only downside. If it was, if Terror of the Peaks was elemental, I'd run him instead. Genesis Wave is just another big X spell. The 3 green, I usually don't have any mana issues with this deck just because of how many lands I run and how, you know, there are a lot of duels. Like there are, I believe, there's only 10 basics, so that means there's 28 cards that tap for 1 or more colors. So I'm usually never off of the green, and since I do generate a lot of mana with this deck, I just pay X for a big amount, and then that's usually like a game closer. Muldrotha. So the way I looked at Muldrotha is the same way I kind of look at Horde of Notions, where Horde lets you play things from your grave without paying their mana cost, and Muldrotha lets you play them from your grave too. But the downside is, with Horde, if I only, let's say, have, let's see, for example, see if I can find it in my pile. Say I only have this idiot in my grave. I'm going to have to pay 5 mana for like a mediocre effect, but with Muldrotha, I could kind of only just pay 2 mana to get him on the field. So Muldrotha's just kind of there in case like any of my like artifacts, creatures, enchantments get blown up. Just helps me keep the deck more consistent and have better access to my grave. Plus he's a 6/6 for 6, so seems good to me. Muldrifter, I'm sure all of you know Muldrifter. 5 mana flying 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, draw 2 cards. Evoke, so it basically just says 3 mana, enters the battlefield, instantly dies. So 3 mana, draw 2 cards. Again, this is like a good blink target I had with Conjurer's Closet. It's good to get back from the grave with Horde and Muldrotha. It's just overall a good card. Plus, it's a fine blocker. No one really ever wants to bother a Muldrifter, at least in my experience. Aid from the Cowl. Revolt. At the beginning of your end step, if a permanent you control left the battlefield this turn, reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a permanent, you may put it on the battlefield. Otherwise, put it on the bottom of your deck. So I have a lot of blink in this deck, so usually this typically triggers, or worst case scenario, if any of my creatures die, I kind of get value. And like I do mostly run permanents. There are very few non-permanent cards in this deck. Like I think we only really saw like 3 so far. Like Genesis Wave, Rishkar's Expertise, and Villainous Wealth. So it usually gets a hit off something. Maelstrom Nexus. I just added this card to the deck. The first spell you cast each turn has Cascade, and I added it using the same principle as I did with Sunbird's Invocation, where Cascading seems really fine and strong in a high mana costed deck, especially when it means you're going to get better value. So ideally, it just kind of makes my spells 2-for-1s. But again, I've yet to play with this card yet. Just added in like the other day. So hopefully good things. Let me know if you guys run this card, or if you like have any good adjusts or includes or cuts from this deck. I'm always open to suggestions and improving my Magic game. Sylvanas Stampede, run this card in every green deck. 6 mana, it's always a win-win solution. You either play big costed things from your hand, or you play big costed things from your deck. There's like very few bad scenarios, unless you're like the only bad scenario I've ever had with this card is casting it while having no other cards in hand, and I say from my deck, and everyone else says, play from my hand. It's essentially just a redraw with creatures, even at that point, which really isn't even that bad. Angry Omnath, landfall, make a 5/5 elemental. Whenever an elemental dies, bolt something. Super strong card. Just playing a land, getting a 5/5 is pretty strong. And that new Omnath that got spoiled for Zendikar, he's probably not going in this deck, I don't think. There's not enough landfall to make him worthwhile, and I don't really have those kind of abilities that make him worthwhile. But if, let's say, going back to this guy, my field gets nuked, I get to bolt a lot of things and deal a lot of damage. Supreme Verdict, it's a hard nuke, can't be countered, destroy all creatures. It's just a good nuke. Guardian Project is great, especially in like EDH. Same thing with Beast Whisperer, where it's a singleton format, so you're always going to basically says whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, if it's a non-token, you just draw a card. So, love this card. 4 mana, whenever you play a creature, draw. Can't go wrong. Maelstrom Pulse, it just destroys like tokens and stuff. Worst case scenario, you just say Soul Ring or whatever. But just 3 mana to destroy a single non-land permanent, it's like, in my opinion, it's essentially in EDH, I'd say a better Vindicate. I mean, it can't hit lands, but very seldom do I think lands are a problem in EDH unless you're playing competitive and people are using Gaia's Cradle. But from what I've seen, most people aren't playing Gaia's Cradles. Yark, again, I do have a lot of Blink. Yark is just like a Panharmonicon, essentially. And he's a 5 mana Death Touch lifelink, so no one really wants to swing into him. AOZ, enters battlefield, make a ton of 0/1 green plants, and then play a land and make all your plants stronger. This guy's good with Blink. He's also just a win condition just by playing lands and him just existing. Like, he's a 7 mana 5/5 that, you know, assuming you have 7 lands, 7 mana 5/5 that gets you 7 blockers that can only get stronger. And if you're playing Plant Tribal, let me tell you, he's pretty good. I'm not, but again, I don't know your decks. Chaos Warp, great removal, especially in red. Very often do I find myself, like, you know, usually use it on your opponent's creatures, like a big problem. But I like to kind of use it on myself sometimes. Just because, like, hey, I can just hit my own land with it if I really need something, or hit a token with it. And then get, like, a big chunky thing from the top of my deck. Which I'm always super welcome for. Especially at instant speed, right? Like, you can always get, like, a blocker or something like that if you really don't know what to do. Corrosive Grip, split second. You just can't respond to it. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. Super good, especially since your opponent can't respond to it. So you just pop, like, an Ashnod's Altar. You pop a Sensei's Top. Or just, like, it's just good artifact and enchant removal. 3 mana, and you can't respond to it, I think is a really good rate. Green Warden is basically just a big Eternal Witness. When he enters, return target card from your grave to the hand, and then when he dies, you can just choose to exile it, and then do it again. Plus 6 mana, 5/4 with a lot of Blink. He seems fine. Beast Within, just destroy target permanent. They get a 3/3. 3/3s really aren't that big of a deal in EDH unless you have a ton of them, and usually I'd say, hey, I'd rather you have a 3/3 than like a Vorinclex or have like a big Eldrazi or something like that. Mirari's Wake. Again, it's a high mana costed deck. I need double mana to play consistently. So 5 mana to have like a buff for all my creatures and double my mana always seems fine for me. Decimate just ruins someone's day. Literally decimates them. Destroy target artifact, creature, artifact, creature, enchantment, and land. You don't have to do the same person, so you can kind of spread the hate or spread the love with the whole table. But the only downside with it is you can't cast it unless you have a legal target for everything, which is a shame because sometimes you're going to be in a situation where you're going to have to destroy your own creature, destroy your own enchantment, just to deal with your opponent's things. Venser, I run a lot of Blink. He does a lot of Blink. And plus, he just makes your creatures unblockable. The way I look at Planeswalkers is you can't judge them based on their ults. Like, his ult is obscene. Like, pretty much any Planeswalker, if it ults, you win the game. Like, that's pretty much how it goes. But, so you got to usually run them off their plus and minus ability, assuming you can get one of each in. So, usually, hey, minus, creatures are unblockable, you just get in for a ton of damage because you're playing Battlecruiser. Or you just blink a permanent you control, which can have good effects, say, for like Ewit or Green Warden or Avenger of Zendikar or things like that. Cultivate, basically the same thing with Kodama's. It's just good, 5-color deck, gets you 2 lands of different colors, and it puts 1 on the field. It's just a really good turn 3. Soul Ring. If you think Soul Ring should be banned, you're an idiot. I'm not going to say anything else. Genesis Ultimatum. Look at the top 5 cards of your library, put any number of permanents from among them on the battlefield, and then just exile it. So it's a weird mana cost. A lot of big Temur. But looking at the 5 cards, again, this is probably like maybe the 5th or 6th maybe 7 tops instant or sorceries. I'll put the deck list in the description below. But even at like the very worst, you're still most likely going to hit like 4 things with it. And usually those 4 things are big things. Writer Replication, great card. You can use it on other things to clone it. You can use it on your opponent's creatures, use it on your own creatures. The way I like to do it is I like to try and get it using Omnath, because if you write a replication kicked on Omnath, it deals like, I think it's like 60 or 80 damage or so, because you have these 5 Omnaths on the field, or sorry, now 6 Omnaths on the field, and you have to sacrifice them to commander damage. So the effect triggers 6 times, and then, so 6 times 3, it deals 18 damage, then 15 damage, then 12 damage, then 9, then 6. It is a good card with that. Usually I run it just to like get, let's say for like another ETB trigger, copy an opponent's thing if they have something good. But again, this is like one of those cards where it's like, I really like to hit it with Omnath, but other than that, you just kind of get like the best creature on the field for 4 mana. Or 5 of them for 9 mana. Incandescent Soulstoke. It is 3 mana, Elemental Lord. Pay 3 mana, put an elemental from your hand on the field, and then sacrifice it at the end step. Really good for like ETB or evoke triggers and ETB triggers. So for example, let's say I need like a quick blocker or something. I can cheese in Green Warden for 2 mana. He's now going to be a 6/5. I can block whatever they have, and then he's going to die anyways. And then I just like return a card from my grave to my hand. So there's a lot of like big chunky elementals with big chunky enter the battlefield effects. And Incandescent Soulstoke is not only a lord, but also like a combat trick. And even if you need to get him for some more damage, you just tap him, and then you can swing with him because it gives him haste. Bane of Progress hates artifacts and enchantments. I run, like, as you guys have seen, a good amount of like enchantments in this deck. I run a few artifacts, but mostly a lot of enchantments. So he is a double-edged sword, but again, like if you're an opponent and you're playing against like an artifact deck or an enchantress deck or a Voltron deck or really anything like that, equipment, what have you, even if you're not playing against any of those and your opponents just have like some troublesome artifacts, like using my deck for example, if like your opponent has like a Mirari's Wake on the field, a Nyx Bloom Ancient, they just have like some good rocks you want to get rid of. 6 mana for never a 2/2 is usually pretty good, and if you're playing with a big pot, he only gets better and better. Panharmonicon, I got a lot of ETB triggers, it doubles it up. Migration Path, I've been thinking about cutting. I recently added it, but I think that like maybe a 2 mana ramp spell would be better, because I believe like I used to run Explosive Vegetation, and I really wasn't thrilled about that. And then Circuitous Route came out, and I still wasn't really thrilled about that because I don't really run any gates, so it doesn't make a difference. And this is just Explosive Vegetation, but with cycling. So the way I look at this card is, hey, if I need land, I got it, and if I don't, I cycle it away. But let me know what you guys think about it. Mirror March, love this card. A lot of ETB effects. And I've seen this card just single-handedly win games with even just 1 creature entering the battlefield. So basically, whenever a non-token enters the battlefield, flip a coin. If you win, get a copy of it, and then flip a coin again. If you win, get a copy of it, and if you lose, you just stop. So basically, flip coins and call it until you lose, and then you get that many copies of that non-token creature with haste, and at the end step, you just exile it. So, yeah. I've seen this card go nuts with Omnath. I've seen this card go nuts with like Eternal Witness, with Nyx Bloom Ancients. You just get like an obscene amount of mana. You can get a scene like, and then you just like swing with them anyway because they're going to go away at the end step. So it's just like damage. You can get it in. Just good enter the battlefield effects. Brago, another non-elemental. So there is a lot of blink effects. I've probably said that a million times, but he's just like another enabler for it. At the very worst, he untaps all your creatures, or he untaps himself. 2. So he basically just can kind of restart your turn, assuming you have like the mana. Temur Ascendancy. Creatures have haste. When a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. So again, this is just good to have. It triggers your own commander, gives you all your creatures haste, it's card draw. And then since there is a lot of blink, if this is on the field, and let's say I blink, 5 or so creatures, I'm drawing 5 or so cards. It's just good to have on the field. It's good when you have a blink engine going on. It's good when you don't. It's good when you... It's just good overall, Giving a creature is like one of the arguably better keywords in Magic. Pretty solid. Stigma Lasher I kind of run just for like a meme. So pretty much what he does, Wither doesn't really matter, but when he deals combat damage to a player, they just can't gain life for the rest of the game. So I run him because in my meta, there's an Oloro player, and I don't like Oloro, so it stops life gain decks just completely. He's probably also, again, on my cut list just for something better, but yeah, it's when he deals, not combat damage, sorry, just damage in general, he triggers. So he works with like Warstorm Surge, he works with Terror of the Peaks, things like that, like those kind of effects. And if he gets blinked and you have those on the field, he hits multiple targets. Other than that, he's just kind of this dork I think is funny. Flamekin Harbinger, 1 mana, 1/1. When it enters, look at the top card, search your deck for an elemental and then put it on top. It's a 1 mana creature tutor. I mean, that's usually pretty good. I almost exclusively get, depending on the point of the game, if it's early game, can't go wrong getting Smoke Braider. If it's late game, can't go wrong hitting like a bigger creature. Like Omnath, Locus of the Royal. Enters the battlefield, just deals damage equal to anything equal to the number of elementals you control. When a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a 1/1 counter on an elemental. And if you have 8 or more lands, just also draw a card. So he's kind of like a jack of all trades, For 4 mana, like at the very worst, he comes in and he deals 1 damage to anything. And then whenever a land enters, you can just make him stronger and eventually start drawing cards just for playing lands. Commander Sphere. It's a 5-color deck. It just helps thin everything out and bounce it out. Plus, if I need to draw a card, it's there for me. Maelstrom Wanderer. One of the big chunky elementals in my deck. Probably one of my favorite elementals in the deck. Cascade. Creatures you control have haste. 8 mana, 7/5. So, like I just said, actually, with Flamekin Harbinger, early game, I like to get Smoke Raider. Late game, I like to get Maelstrom Wanderer. Because, like, if you see a Maelstrom Wanderer and he's cast, like, even if you counter him, the Cascades are still going. So, 7/5 with haste at very base value, even without Cascade, is fine. But, like, the Cascade, and I think, 8 probably is my highest CMC in the deck. Like, he just hits everything. Aethersnipe, 6 mana, 4/4. When it enters play, return a non-land from a non-land permanent to its owner's hand, and it has Evoke for 3 mana. So, hey, if you want a big chunky 4/4, pay 6 mana, you can bounce something. Or if you don't want to, you just need a quick removal spell at sorcery speed or a bounce spell, pay 3 mana. Again, it's good with blink effects. It's good with Warstorm Surge effects, things like that. Flickerwisp is just it's just kind of there to keep a blink engine going, if that makes sense. When it enters the battlefield, exile another target non-land permanent, return that card to the battlefield under its controller's turn. I think probably the best thing to get it is opponents bounce lands. So then you can just kind of make them miss their land drop. Essentially, it's kind of a good old meme because it's going to make them bounce a land anyways. But other than that, it's just mainly to keep things going on, keep a flick chain going. Living Death. So I don't mind when my creatures die, just because Horde can get them back, and then Muldrotha can get them back. So Living Death, if because nukes happen pretty common in EDH, this is just a good way to get back all my creatures. Or if because you got to think hey, Maelstrom Wanderer hits the field, you want to get rid of them, You have Muldrotha hits the field, Omnath hits the field, you just want to get rid of them. This is kind of my solution against it, is playing Living Death, doing the old switcheroo between the board and the grave, and then, but typically you just Living Death, when you have a win, or when you just got nuked, something like that. Tyrant of Discord is a fantastic card. So when he enters the battlefield, target opponent chooses a permanent at random, and then sacrifices it. If it's a non-land permanent, repeat the process. So the way I do it is we count up their permanents, either roll some ask Siri or Google, pick a random number between 1 and however many permanents they have, and then just add it up. And they sacrifice it. It's really good because by itself, it's just at worst, it's a 7 mana 7/7 that eats a land. And then at best, it can wipe their entire field. If they're playing tokens, it's super brutal for tokens. And like most likely it probably eats like 2 or 3 things and then hits a land. But if you can get blink going on with this guy, like it's literally absurd. You just start eating their board and there's nothing they can really do about it. Soul of the Harvest, trample, 6/6 for 6. Whenever a non-token enters the battlefield under your control, just draw a card. He's a big boy. He's got a good effect. That's pretty much it. Merciless Eviction. If you're playing white-black, Merciless Eviction is the best nuke in all of Magic, in my opinion. It basically just gets rid of any problem you have. If you're playing an artifact deck, boom, they're gone. If they're playing creatures or Go-Eye or whatever, boom, they're gone. They're playing enchantments or enchantress, something like that, boom, no worries. Or if they're playing super friends, it's gone. Like, it's just modal cards like this, especially a modal nuke, is usually obscene. And like a nuke that hits every problem you can possibly have, just perfect. Best nuke in Magic. Can't even, I'm like losing my words because it's so good. Finally, last card, Risen Reef. Risen Reef is a card that should have never been printed. He is an obscene card. When he or another elemental enters the battlefield, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land, play it for free, tapped. If not, just straight up draw it. And you don't reveal it. You look at the top card. If it's a land, you may play it for free. If it's not a land, you just put it in your hand. He combos with a lot of decks, a lot of cards, other elementals. Just simply having him and just like playing the game without even focusing on him, you just start to combo out with rampant card draw. So that is my 5-color Horde of Notions Elemental Tribal deck. Please let me know what you guys think. I'll put his deck list in the description down below. If you guys have any like improvements or things you would add, or if you have your own elemental deck, please tell me what you go on. I always like to make improvements and adjustments. And that's all for this video. If you liked it, please comment, subscribe, give it a like, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one.